Bows, TKOs, yeah. Bows, TKOs, we got bows, TKOs, yeah. Bows, TKOs, we got bows, TKOs, yeah. Bows, TKOs.
Bows and TKOs. We are live, episode 51, coming at you from the Valley. I'm your host, Shane Gillette, for this weekly MMA podcast. Again, episode 51. And for this week, we have a few fights that have been announced. The Ultimate Fighter season premiere. We're recapping UFC 302 that went down in Newark, New Jersey. And then another fight night we are previewing for this weekend's action, but it's going down in Louisville, Kentucky. If we learned anything from Chicago and the Midwest fans, I expect them to show up and show out. So a loaded show for you guys this week. Let's jump right in. Some fights that we had announced. We had Andre Petroski and Josh Fremd for July 13th, as well as Santiago Ponzinibbio and Muslim Salikov for July 13th. That should be a pretty good banger. Two veterans going at it on that July fight night card. Now, the other day, some interesting news had surfaced about literally the day before Conor McGregor pulling out of his presser in Dublin. They had sold tickets to it. The Irish fans had sold it out in like 30 seconds or something like that. But he had postponed it for unforeseen events, which obviously is going to open up a can of worms of what the heck's going to, what's going on? Is the fight going to happen? Is it not going to happen? Is he hurt? Is he drinking too much Irish Forge Stout? So, something to keep monitoring and to tune in to see what's happening there. I do think the fight will still happen. I'm not reading too much into this, but it just sucks for the people who had planned I believe on their Monday to do this and had paid for the ticket. And other major event news, Mike Tyson and Jake Paul is going to be rescheduled. Mike was on a plane and had an ulcer flare-up, so the doctors are forcing him to rest. So he will at least, I'd assume, have to take a couple months off. The fight right now, I believe, is in July. So it'll be interesting to see when that is moved. And again, people that had already planned that bought really expensive tickets at Cowboy Stadium for no reason to watch this fight. And the other fighters on this card, the Darren Tills of the world, lots of things to be moving here. But as an OG Ultimate Fighter fan, I'm excited for this season's Ultimate Fighter. I know on social media there's been a lot of havoc as it's the Alexa Grasso, Valentina Shevchenko trilogy, which even myself as a big Valentina fan maybe don't have the most excitement for, as I think Alexa's kind of put a stamp on it. But we do have some very quality matchups to kick things off in this show. And in episode 1, we had two really good grapplers. Alexa got the first overall pick, so Valentina got to pick the first fight. And she put her number 1 overall pick, Rody Rowetz, against, I believe, Alexa's number 1 pick, who is a wrestling-heavy Olympian from Mexico, Guillermo Torres. And Rody Rowetz defeated him after a really good first round. Guillermo stole round 2 with his grappling. So in the Ultimate Fighter, you get 2 rounds. If it's 1-1, they have a overtime round. That's what happened, and Rody Rowetz was able to dig deep and make it happen. A guy who trains in his father's gym. Again, looks to be pretty high quality. I'm excited about the quality of fighters. It's the most international Ultimate Fighter they've ever had. They've hosted Brazil Ultimate Fighters and other foreign Ultimate Fighters, but this one having and showcasing fighters from all around the world should make for a very high quality show, and I would assume the winners of these two classes are going to show out in the UFC. But only one episode in, you don't get to learn too much about them. You get to learn a little bit difference in coaching styles. They were showcasing Alexa working with their fighters on her boxing, and Valentina saying no water during training, like super hardcore, the classic bullet that you would come to expect. So hyped up. We'll talk about that every week. But let's talk about UFC 302. Overall in the picks, I did really well. I went 9-2 in my picks, which puts us at 51 episodes in, 314 wins, 156 losses, with 6 no contests or draws. And on the year, we are 121 wins, 70 losses, 3 no contests or draws. If I were to give a quick recap of the card, I would say there was a lot of grappling and decisions throughout this card. This is the debut of the new gloves. Some people said with them being thinner, it would be grappling favorited. Some people thinking with the lighter weight, maybe it'll favor strikers and we would see more knockouts. That wasn't necessarily the case on this card. But at the end of the day, we knew that the co-main and the main event were putting the card on their back for 302. And with the co-main underperforming and Paulo not able to be bringing the action that we're accustomed to seeing to Sean Strickland, I thought that put a little bit of a hamper on this card. The main event, you could almost say, is better than you had expected because Dustin hasn't been out of the round 2 against the grapplers that he's fought in the light heavyweight title chances and have been choked out earlier. But the crowd was great. They were there early. I would even debate that the prelims were better outside of the main event. For a pay-per-view and obviously coming off some really good cards, I'm going to get it a solid 5 out of 10. I paid for it, my hard-earned cash, and I kind of even was feeling like, I kind of wish I had streamed this one. But nonetheless, some good fights that we did not break down. We had Basil Hafez with a unanimous decision over Mickey Gall in one hell of a back-and-forth fight. Basil Hafez really putting on a show and making a name for himself in the UFC now. But we're going to kick it off. In the prelims, we had Jake Matthews with the unanimous decision over Phil Rowe. And I thought this fight was pretty decent overall. But Jake throughout was really controlling where the fight went. He was able to outstrike Phil each round. And he even got a takedown in the third round to put a stamp on the scorecards. Jake has definitely showcased a good mix of striking, speed, and it was just too much for Phil Rowe in this fight. I really do think Jake is starting to come into his own as a fighter. It's his 10th year in the UFC, which is kind of wild to think about because he isn't even 30 years old yet and just scratching the surface of his prime. But that's why I had the confidence in him going into this fight, and I think he's starting to validate the potential that he has. And I think there's still a ton of room for growth, but a pretty overall dominant fight here. Phil had his moments. Phil scrapped in this fight. But the stats kind of tell the story of the show here. Phil landed 40 total strikes, 34 of those significant. He was 0 for 1 in his own takedown attempts with a reversal and 1 minute and 50 seconds of control time. And Jake landed 89 total strikes, 66 of those significant, so almost doubled Phil's output through 15 minutes. He had a takedown, a reversal, and 3 minutes of control time. So Jake starts a new winning streak. He is 3-2 since 2022. And Phil extends his losing streak to 2. He is 2-2 since 2022. So what's next for these men? Well, I'd like to see Jake take on Carlston Harris. I think that's a good appropriate matchup. And for Phil, how about Matthew Semmelsberger? I think stylistically that would be one hell of a fight for fans and for the fighters. So got that fight right as well as this one in the prelims where we had Grant Dawson with unanimous decision over Joe Selecki. And, coming in this fight, we knew it was literally a wrestler versus a grappler or BJJ artist. And Grant was really just putting the pedal to the metal here. He continued to attempt takedowns to get top control, land some decent ground and pound, looked to tire Joe out when he's fighting from his back. And Joe, he tried to get in good positions for submissions. He was consistently moving from his back the majority of this fight, but that's just not going to get the job done. And I was really surprised that they didn't look to stand and strike more, but, Grant coming off a quick knockout against Bobby Green, wanted to get a win. He did it in somewhat of an ugly manner, but although ugly, he did dominate. And the stats tell that story. Grant landed 146 total strikes, although only 46 of those significant, a lot of touchy-feely ground and pound top control shots. He did have 3 takedowns. He was 3 for 3 and had 13 minutes and 46 seconds of control time. So damn near the entire 15-minute fight of control time. And Joe only landed 27 total, 12 significant. He was 0 for 2 in takedowns and had 1 submission attempt. So you can see the volume a lot lower on Joe's end, just fighting from his back, and only have one submission attempt with almost 14 minutes from his back is not going to get the job done. So props to the ATT alum and Grant Dawson doing the damn thing. So Grant's back on a new winning streak. He is 4-1 since 2022. And Joe extends his losing streak to 2. He is 2-2 since 2022. So what's next for these guys? Well, I think Grant Dawson and RDA, Rafael Dos Anjos, I think that would be a fun fight. But I also don't think RDA might not accept that fight. So if not, how about Drakkar Klose? I think that would be a good one with his win streak going right now. And for Joe, how about a scrap with Terrence McKinney, who's on a bit of a skid? I think that would be a fun matchup as well. But moving on, we had Jailton Almeida with a round 1 submission via rear naked choke over Alexander Romanov. And to be honest, this was somewhat of an embarrassing performance by a really good grappler in Romanov, but this has almost come to be the norm for him. You know, he still looks like he isn't showing up in the best of shape, which he had early in his UFC career. I think he's trending in the right direction, but in a fight like he had against Almeida, you got to come and become prepared. And Almeida was just able to throw him down and get his back way too easily. But good quality bounce back win on a quick turnaround for Jailton Almeida. Statistically, it only took Jailton 2 total and 1 significant strikes with 1 takedown and 2 attempts, 2 submission attempts, and 2 minutes and 7 seconds of control time. And you want to talk about embarrassing, Alexander only landed 1 total and significant strike. So, Jailton starts a new winning streak, and he is 7-1 since 2022. He stays at 7 in the rankings. And Alexander starts a new losing streak. He moves to 2-3 since 2022 and stays at number 13 in the rankings. So what's next for these guys? Well, I say, hey, with Jailton, let's let him fight the winner of Sergey Pavlovich and Alexander Volkov that's coming up in Saudi Arabia. But if he does want to stay active, which he's been really active, he could fight Marcin Tybura. And for Alexander, he could have a fight with Rodrigo Nascimento. Moving into the prelim headliner, your boy called this one as well. Roman Kopylov, the underdog, with a split decision win over Cesar Almeida. And Roman went into his bag a little deeper than I thought. I assumed he'd bring out the grappling, but he went to the grappling well against a very good kickboxer in this fight. But he also traded a lot of shots as I expected and won some of the exchanges against Almeida. He did have the knockdown as well, but he didn't want to give Cesar a chance to exchange blows the entire fight and find a big shot himself. So great game plan by Roman, showing us how well-rounded he could be if needed. Statistically, Roman landed 74 total strikes, 41 of those significant. He had 5 takedowns and 9 attempts, so did really good with those. Had a knockdown and 8 minutes and 39 seconds of control time, so about a round and a half. And Cesar landed 114 total strikes and 58 of those significant, so he had quite a bit more volume than Roman, but was taken down and controlled for a lot of the fight. So now, Roman starts a new winning streak. He is 5-1 since 2022, and Cesar suffers his first pro loss. He is now 2-1 in the UFC. So where do these gents go next? Well, give me an absolute banger. Give me Roman Kopylov and Gregory Rodriguez. Sheesh, I couldn't wait for that fight. And for Cesar, he could get another striker in a fight with Edmund Shabazian. I think that would be a doozy. Moving into the main card, we had Randy Brown with a unanimous decision over Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos. And this fight was a little bit chaotic for both men. Even more so, though, as Randy had announced that he broke his foot in the first round, which is impressive because he still got the job done against a very good and well-rounded veteran, and still had to put 10-plus minutes with that broken foot, and you really didn't even notice. Randy obviously won round one with his striking and his length, but I did think he lost round 2 due to Elizeu's grappling ability. But then in round 3, the winner-take-all round, Randy was able to get up after being taken down again And then he was able to get off some beautiful shots to steal round 3 and win the fight via decision. Statistically, Randy landed 89 total strikes, 67 of those significant, with 2 submission attempts and a reversal, while Elizao landed 42 total, so about half the volume, and only 26 of those significant, so about a third of those significant from Randy's. But he did have 4 takedowns and 7 attempts, a submission attempt, and 5 minutes and 33 seconds of control time, a little bit more than an entire round. But Randy extends his winning streak to 3. He is 5-1 since 2022. And Elizao starts a new losing streak. And he is now was coming off a draw before that. So he is 1-1-1 since 2022. So what's next? Well, Randy, after the fight, called for Jeff Neal and Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. But I think a matchup with Neil Magny seems to be like probably more of a likely next step for him. And Elizao taking on Gunnar Nelson, I think that would be a fun fight. Who knows if Gunnar's fighting anytime soon? So if not, how about Yarosh Medic? Then one of the fights I did not expect, we had Nico Price with a unanimous decision over Alex Morano. And Alex looked good in round 1, as he typically does, but he really started to slow down in round 2 and round 3. He was completely gassed. He had nothing left in the tank. Which, somewhat credit to Alex, I know he did take this fight on short notice, and he also only fought 2 months prior, but I'm not sure on how or why he was in such bad shape for this fight. If you're taking a fight on short notice, you're doing so and preparing for that, and you got to have the cardio to go 15 hard minutes, but you have to credit Nico for digging deep, making Alex work for that, out-cardioing him, and landing more strikes in rounds 2 and 3. Statistically, Nico landed 50 total strikes, 34 of those significant. He did have 3 takedowns in 3 minutes and 37 seconds of control time. And Alex only landed 30 total strikes, 21 of them significant. So Nico now ends his 2-fight losing streak and starts a new winning streak. And Alex starts a new losing streak and moves to an even 3-3 since 2022. So what's next? Well, I would like to see Nico and Jeremiah Wells, while Alex can fight Trevin Giles. And then this wild fight. I mean, any kind of Kevin Holland fight is a little bit wild. But we had Kevin Holland with a round 1 submission via armbar over Michael Oleksiuk. Performance of the night, 50 G's for Big Mouth. And, you know, it didn't last long, but it was a wild and quick fight. A little surprising to me, anyways. Oleksiuk was piecing Kevin up on the feet. Landed some big, nice overs, and Kevin went down to the canvas pretty early. But McCall tried to get on top, and while he did, he overcommitted, left his arm hanging. Kevin snatched up that arm in an arm bar like a long, lengthy fighter would do. And he had the arm bar really deep. He looked at the ref, kind of looking at him like, hey, this guy's not tapping. If I go more, I'm going to snap this guy's arm. He didn't tap. The ref didn't say anything. So he went that extra. You could see his elbow bend in. I'm not sure if he broke something or ripped some tendons or something. But Michael kind of gave a little tap. They called the fight. He was trying to protest that he didn't tap, which for me anyways, you know, Michael's had an up and down UFC career. You not tapping is just going to hurt your arm and hold you out of that fight longer. What's the odds of you being able to win that fight with a messed up arm? I don't think it's very high, so I don't really see the reward, you know, why that's worth the risk for him. You don't want to put yourself at risk of a major injury just to last a few more seconds. Either way, he protested it. I like the stop. I thought he did give a little tap anyways. But huge kind of comeback win for Kevin Holland in a short span. But man, although he's up and down divisions, he's fighting anywhere, he needs to improve on the feet because he's really been exposed. And no discredit to Michael Oleksiuk, but he is not one of the more deadly guys in the division with his hands. Statistically, Kevin only landed 8 total and significant strikes with a submission, and Michael landed 9 total and 8 significant. So Kevin ends his 2-fight losing streak. He starts a new winning streak. His first win back at middleweight in quite a while. He is 5-4 since 2022, 9 fights in 2 years. That's Kevin Holland for you. Stays at 15 in the rankings at the welterweight rankings. And Michael extends his losing streak to 2. He is 3-4 since 2022. He's been pretty active as well. So where do we put Kevin from here? I would say, hey, now that he's at middleweight, why not book him against Paul Craig? I think him and Berju would be quite the sight. And for Michael, he could fight Albert Jurayev. I think that would be an appropriate one. He may be out for some time with that arm injury, though. And then the much anticipated co-main event. We had Sean Strickland with a split decision victory over Paulo Costa. And how this was a split decision, I have no idea. But this was all about Paulo Costa not being able to execute his game plan against Sean, like many haven't of reset on Sean's path to the title and back. But yeah, Sean was just doing his classic Philly shell, getting up into Paulo's face, closing distance, landing jabs, nice straight rights down the pipe, nice teep kicks to keep Paulo at range. And in the first couple rounds, Paulo was throwing a ton of heavy leg and calf kicks. And I thought that was going to be the game plan because he knew Sean was going to come forward and close distance, chop out that lead leg, chop out the power and the control that he has because he's not really good at switching stances. And then rounds 3, 4, and 5, because it's a non-traditional 5-round non-title fight, go for broke and make it a brawl like Paulo usually does. And that just isn't what transpired. He really never got to make it a brawl. He never really got to get much shots going off, power shots, big leg kicks. And I thought what we had saw out of Paulo in the Robert Whittaker fight was some of that good game plan, some of those big actionable shots. And I thought we would see those against Sean, and that wasn't the case at all. So the safe bet was Sean by decision, especially in a 5-round fight. I, for some reason, chose against that, but Sean proved that he is a problem no matter who, or when, or where. And the stats tell that Sean landed 182 total and significant strikes over the course of the fight, and Paulo landed 158 total and significant. So Sean, back on a winning streak. He is 5-3 since 2022. He's been active and successful. And Paulo extends his losing streak to 2. He is 1-2 since 2022 and moves down 1 spot in the rankings to number 8. So where does Sean go next? He said he wants to wait for a title shot and take the winner of DDP and Israel Adesanya. I honestly think he will do that. For as active as he's been, this is what he needs to do. So I assume he waits for the title. And for Paulo, I would love to see him take on Roman Dolidze. I think that would be a good bounce back opportunity and a good stylistic matchup for Paulo Costa. But I am shocked that Paulo, on one of the biggest stages that he's had, didn't really get to perform and really get to take those chances. And then in the main event, the pound for pound number one fighter in the world, excuse me, and potentially the lightweight GOAT, Islam Makhachev, with a round 5 submission via Bravo choke over Dustin Poirier. And as much as we all wanted to see the Dustin opportunity, he had his chances, and it's just too much to overcome the hill of Islam. But Dustin showed that he could hang in this fight. He improved against grapplers from his previous lightweight title shots, but Islam was just too much everywhere in this fight. Dustin did show things he's always shown his career. His heart, his grit, his determination. But he couldn't do enough. And to add to an even crazier storyline, there was rumors that Islam had staph with some photos of his leg. He did confirm that he had staph about 3 weeks before the fight. And in the last 2 weeks, he had to take a complete week off where he couldn't train. So, Islam going 25 minutes with Dustin, having the cardio, kind of outdoing him at the end of the fight. Very impressive, especially combating a staph infection, to add to the legacy of Islam. But round 1, Islam almost made this fight seem like it was going to be a traditional, Khabib versus Dustin fight. He was able to get the takedown fairly quickly, but Dustin remained calm, was able to play good defense from his back for probably 3.5+ minutes, and was able to survive to round 2. And we're thinking, okay, he's got a chance. And round 2, it was very close, but I thought Dustin actually won the round with his striking volume. controlling the round, having the more significant strikes. But either way, it was a very, very brutally close round, but he was able to avoid takedowns. And then round 3, Islam was pouring it on and got another takedown to steal that round. He had a lot of control in this round to go up 2-1. In round 4, it was very interesting because Dustin defended a ton of takedowns, landed some good shots while getting back onto his feet. I don't know how to score this fight. It was this round as well because it was so close. I would say, though, he evened it up to go 2-2, but rounds 2 and 4 could easily have gone Islam's way as well because Islam was doing good with striking with Dustin and landing clean shots. I just thought Dustin landed the better ones. Islam's face was pretty busted up, so was Dustin's, but it didn't matter because the judges were out of it. As in round 5, Islam did what he does. He put a stamp on this fight and showed the world that he is the pound-for-pound number 1. But all the talk of how good Dustin's striking is, the southpaw against Islam has showed that he's been able to hang with Volkanovski, Dustin, and even outmatch these guys in their striking departments at some points throughout the fights. So Islam continues to evolve. He's, I think, 33 in the middle of his prime. And statistically, he landed 147 total strikes, 88 of those significant. He had 5 takedowns and 16 attempts. Not a very good ratio there, so very massive round of applause and credits to Dustin Poirier. Islam had 2 submission attempts and 10 minutes and 23 seconds of control time. So over 2 minutes, 2 rounds total of control time. And Dustin landed 104 total strikes, 74 of those significant. So about 40 less and 14 less significant. So you could see he was landing some pretty good significant strikes. So Islam extends his winning streak to 14, his 3rd title defense in the impossible lightweight division. And Dustin starts a new losing streak. He is 2-2 since 2022. He stays at number 4 in the rankings. Now Islam, he's been talking about moving up to fight Leon, all these different options. I think it's very clear that he is going to fight Arman Sarukian in a rematch next. And if Dustin does fight again, which there's a lot of drama around him potentially retiring, if he's going to fight, it's got to be somewhat of a legacy fight to get him excited, get him into the gym, and add to his legacy and add to that resume. Volkanovski has asked to be his dancing partner. I think that could be a fun potential retirement fight. I don't really see anybody at lightweight pulling him in. So if Dustin does fight, I'm going to go with Alexander Volkanovski in a legacy fight. But that's UFC 302. Again, for a pay-per-view, I gave it only a 5 out of 10. But there was some highlights, including Dustin going to the 5th round. I thought Roman Kopylov showed out. Jake Matthews looking good. And some grappling heavy affairs. But that sets us up for another fight night this weekend. But staying in the Midwest, it should get a little crazy. Should be fun. In Louisville, Kentucky. Prelims are on ESPN at 2 p.m. Pacific. Main card at 5 p.m. on ESPN, so a little bit earlier of a card. Some good fights that we will not break down. We have Contender Series alum Daniel Marcos taking on John Castaneda. And Contender Series alum Carlos Prats taking on Charles Radke. But we're going to kick this bad boy off in the prelims. We have Taylor Double Impact Lapilus, 32 years old with a 19-4 record, taking on Cody the Spartan Stamen, 34 years old with a 21-6-1 record. Now, this is a very intriguing matchup between 2 talented fighters with a little bit, kind of different backgrounds and upbringings to get to the point where they are, but only 2 years of age separation in their primes. Now, Taylor had his first stint with the UFC back in 2015. He was only 23 years old. He did have success going 3-1, but wasn't re-signed, and then eventually came back recently in 2023 after dominating other promotions. Now, Cody's been in the UFC since 2017. He has had mixed results. He was briefly ranked in the top 15 of a very good bantamweight division, but every time he fights that ranked level competition, he stumbles. So breaking it down, Taylor trains out of the MMA Factory. He's on a 1-fight losing streak, 4-2 overall in the UFC. He's 1-1 since he's returned to the UFC. 6 of his 19 wins are via submission, and he has some length in this fight. 8.5-inch reach advantage and an 8-inch leg reach advantage. I should pay some dividends. Now, Cody trains out of Extreme Couture. He has a blue belt in BJJ. He has a D2 wrestling background at a Grand Valley State University. He's on a 1-fight losing streak, and he is 2-2 since 2022. 7 of his 21 wins are via knockout. Now, I do think in this fight, Cody's going to mix in grappling often to close distance, stay out of that kickboxing range from the longer Taylor. But I do think Cody's going to have some wrestling success. I really just don't know if he's going to be able to keep Taylor down throughout the fight. And when it comes to striking, I do think this is going to favor Taylor. I think his speed and his length will be too much for Cody to overcome. Cody struggled against opponents like that. For that reason, I'm taking Taylor Lapilus. We put him on that parlay. We marking that ish down, and we getting that bread. Moving on. We have Brad Superman Katona, 32 years old with a 15-3 record, taking on Jesse Butler, 32 years old with a 12-5 record. And here I have to admit I'm a little shocked at the quality of opponent that Brad has gotten here. You know, he's in his prime at 32. It's his second UFC stunt, and they're just looking to give him a layup. Like, nothing's a layup in the UFC, but Jesse came to the UFC as a short notice fill-in against the veteran Jim Miller, and he was finished in 23 seconds. But breaking down this fight, Brad has a black belt in BJJ, a black belt in Shotokan Karate. He is the only ever 2-time Ultimate Fighter champion. He's a Brave alum and former champion with 1 successful title defense. He's on a 1-fight losing streak. He is 1-1 in the UFC since his return, and overall is 3-3 in the UFC. Now, Jesse is a Fury FC alum. 8 of his 12 wins are via submission. He's on a 1-fight losing streak, which was his UFC debut. He has an 8.5-inch reach advantage and a 4-inch leg reach advantage. There's some reaches in this card. Now, honestly, Brad should be able to get through this fight somewhat easily, but knowing Brad, he is going to find a way to go to a decision and barely win a very close fight. Now, Jesse has shown he can get submissions. He's got decent hands. And if Brad is too wrestling heavy, maybe he can get himself in a bad position and get caught. But I'm not betting on that. I'm taking Brad Katona. We putting him on that parlay. We marking that ish down, and we getting that bread. Moving on. We have Andrea KGB Lee, 35 years old with a 13-9 record, taking on Montana De La Rosa, 29 years old with a 12-9-1 record. Now, this fight is actually a rematch from 2019. And in the first matchup, Andrea Lee won via unanimous decision. But a lot has changed since 2019. In the first matchup, both women implemented some grappling, but Andrea doubled Montana's striking volume throughout that fight. The difference this time is Andrea has definitely seemingly slowed down later in her years, and I think Montana has actually, pretty impressively improved her striking and boxing as she's now in her prime at 29. Breaking it down, Andrea has a Kaioshin style. She's got a black belt in Kaioshin, a brown belt in Judo and BJJ. She has a crew in Muay Thai. She's an Invicta, Legacy FC, and LFA alum, former LFA champion. She is on a 4-fight losing streak. Her last win was in November of 2021 against Cynthia Cavillo. Now, Montana trains out of Team Elevation. She has a brown belt in BJJ. She's an Ultimate Fighter, Legacy FC, and LFA alum. She is on a 3-fight losing streak. And her last win was June of 2021 against Ariane Lipsky. 8 of her 12 wins come via submission. Now, I think clearly Andrea can kickbox her way to victory in this fight, and Montana could potentially wrestle and grapple her way to victory as well. Now, I thought Andrea would also defeat Miranda Maverick in her last fight, and she let her, she let Miranda do work against her in the striking department and the grappling with super easy takedowns. Now, Montana, she has lost her last fight. She has shown improvement in her fights and her losses with her boxing, and I think she could use that to get Andrea wanting to strike, mix in the grappling, still a decision. She's now in her prime, and Andrea doesn't seem to be very motivated, in my opinion. For that reason, I'm taking the underdog to win the rematch. I'm taking Montana De La Rosa, but avoiding this on any parlays where possible. Also in the prelims, we have Tiago Moises, 29 years old with an 18-7 record, taking on Ludovic Mr. Highlight Klein, 29 years old with a 21-4-1 record. Now this is actually a fun and evenly matched fight between two dudes in their primes here. Tiago has definitely fought better competition and has had better success in his UFC tenure, but Ludovic is looking for a highlight victory, and this very well could be his chance. Breaking it down, Tiago has a BJJ style. He's a southpaw fighter. He trains out of American Top Team, and he has a black belt in BJJ. 2 of his last 4 fights have been fight of the night or performance of the night. He's showing up. He's showing out. I like me a good Tiago Moises fight. He's on a 1-fight winning streak, 3-1 since 2022. He is an RFA alum and former RFA champion with 2 successful title defenses, but is also an LFA and Ultimate Fighter Brazil alum. 8 of his 14 wins are via submission. Now, Ludovic is a southpaw fighter. He's a Cage Warriors alum. He's on a 4-fight winning streak with a draw since he has fought at the lightweight division. 9 of his 21 wins are via knockout, 8 via submission, so 17 of his 21 wins via finish. That's impressive. And even in some of the losses, I've liked what I've seen from both fighters. I think Ludovic looks a lot better at lightweight, but Tiago's striking continues to improve. He has good wrestling in BJJ. But Ludovic really hasn't fought the level of grappler that Tiago possesses. While the fight stays standing, I think it should be a very good match, and Ludovic might have the edge. This is a very tough fight to pick, but I'm taking Tiago with that better experience and quality gym, and I am avoiding this on a parlay where possible, which sets us up for the main card. We have Miguel, the Carmel Thunder Baeza, 31 years old with a 10-3 record, taking on Punahele Puna Soriano, 31 years old with a 9-4 record. Now this fight is 2 men in their primes as well, but these guys are looking to get a footing in the UFC. Both guys have showcased a ton of talent and skill, but they really haven't been able to put it all together. Their confidence is a little bit shot right now. Their fighting careers could be on the line, so this should, ironically, probably make for a fantastic fight. Breaking it down, Miguel is an orthodox fighter. He has a black belt in BJJ. 3 of his last 5 fights have been performance of the night or fight of the night, so he's showing up, he's showing out. He's a Titan FC and Contender Series alum. He is on a 3-fight losing streak. He has not won since November of 2020. 7 of his 10 wins are via knockout. 2 of his 3 losses are also via knockout. So to knock out or be knocked out. Now, Punahele trains out of Extreme Couture. He has a brown belt in judo. He has a D3 wrestling background out of Wartburg College. He's a PFL, Titan FC, LFA, and Contender Series alum. He's on a 2-fight losing streak and is only 1-3 since 2022. 6 of his 9 wins are via knockout. Now, Punahele is definitely a problem early in the fights with his aggression, his power striking, and his wrestling abilities. Miguel is a very tough and durable fighter, and he should be able to withstand and maybe even have a speed advantage when it comes to the striking here. But as the fight wears on, Puna definitely can get sloppy, especially with his takedowns. Maybe Miguel can take advantage with some submission openings. But I think Puna is going to bring the fight to Miguel. I think he's going to get some takedowns, and over time could potentially catch Miguel or wear him out through the fight to get, his grappling lead him to a ground and pound finish. For that reason, I'm taking Punahele Soriano, but I'm avoiding him on a parlay where possible. And then we have Julian the Cuban Missile Crisis Marquez, 34 years old with a 9-4 record, taking on Zachary Savage Reese, 30 years old with a 6-1 record. Now this fight, I'm kind of surprised is on the main card. Both men are on a skid, and Zachary is pretty new to the UFC in general. But Julian at this point in his UFC career is fighting for his UFC life, while Reese is looking to make a name for himself, and he is just now entering his prime at 30 years old. Breaking it down, Julian is an orthodox fighter. He trains out of Factory X. He has a purple belt in BJJ. He's a Bellator, LFA, and Contender Series alum. He's on a 2-fight losing streak and hasn't won since April of 2021. 6 of his 9 wins are via knockout, 3 via submission, so all 9 of his wins are via finish, and 2 of his 4 losses are via knockout. He likes to finish or be finished. Now Zachary, he's a Fury FC and Contender Series alum. He's on a 1-fight losing streak, which was his UFC debut. 4 of his 6 wins are via knockout, 2 via submission, so all 6 of his wins also via finish. He does have some length as well, with a 5-inch reach advantage and a 4-inch leg reach advantage. Now Zach has the length advantage, but I believe Julian is going to come in with a dialed game plan, knowing what's at stake for himself in the UFC. He's going to be circling with his power, looking to close in range, and potentially even grapple with Zach throughout this fight. I really don't know what's going to happen in this fight and don't have a ton of confidence, but for the sake of picking, I'll take Julian Marquez, but I'm avoiding this on any parlay where possible. Then we have this banger. We got Bruno the Hulk Ferreira, 31 years old with an 11-1 record, taking on Dustin Stoltzfus, 32 years old with a 15-5 record. Again, this is a banger of a fight that most likely will be a violent finish. Bruno, since he's entered the UFC, has been a finishing machine, and Dustin's had his ups and downs throughout the middle of his prime, but he is coming off his best win, which was 2023 against Punahele Soriano. Breaking this down, Bruno is a Contender Series alum. He's on a 1-fight winning streak and is 3-1 in the UFC. 8 of his 11 wins are via knockout, 3 via finish, so all of his 11 wins come via finish. Now Dustin is a purple belt in BJJ. He has a black belt in Luta Livre, a red belt in Tang Soo Do. He's a Contender Series alum. He's on a 1-fight winning streak and is 2-1 since 2022. 7 of his 16 wins are via submission, and he is sporting a 3-inch reach advantage and a 4.5-inch leg reach advantage. A lot of violence, a lot of finishers, and a lot of length. That's the story of this card. Now, I do think Dustin is going to want to just stand and strike, that I don't think he is going to want to, because Bruno possesses some serious knock-you-out power. So I do expect him to mix in some wrestling and grappling throughout this fight. I don't really expect Dustin to be able to get takedowns with ease here, but he can use his jab and kicks to score from range, maybe chop out that leg and power that Bruno possesses. But I do think Bruno is eventually going to find the mark here. For that reason, I am taking the Hulk. We putting Bruno on that parlay, we marking that ish down, and we getting that bread. Moving on. We have Raul El Nino Problema Rosas Jr., 19 years old with an 8-1 record, taking on Ricky Pretty Tercios, 31 years old with a 13-3 record. His nickname is Pretty. I think it should be Tricky Ricky personally. But Raul, he is a real problem in the first round with his aggression, his size and power for the division. But we have seen that if his opponents can outlast that first round, then it's like a whole nother fight in the making. Now, Ricky, he's in his prime. He does have a lot more experience, especially winning the Ultimate Fighter, which is a gauntlet itself, and he's done good in a few other promotions. But Ricky hasn't fought in more than a year, which is good because he's probably working on his craft. He trains at a Team Alpha Male, which is a good gym. And just a reminder, this fight was originally supposed to take place at Mexican Independence Day, but Raul pulled out minutes before the fight, not feeling well, whether that's nerves in front of his Mexican country. I'm really shocked that he pulled out, so there's got to be something there as well. But breaking it down, Raul is a Contender Series alum. He's on a 1-fight winning streak and is 3-1 in the UFC. 5 of his 8 wins are via submission. Now, Ricky trains at a Team Alpha Male. He's a Legacy FC, Fury FC, Bellator, Contender Series, King of the Cage, and Ultimate Fighter alum. He's on a 1-fight winning streak and is 1-1 since 2022, and he's rocking a 4-inch reach advantage. Now, I wouldn't say Ricky is amazing or great anywhere, but he is a solid fighter who is going to keep the pedal on the gas for 15 minutes and do whatever is needed. Now, Rule is already more talented, but we will see if he is improved for a 15-minute fight, because if not, Ricky is going to take advantage. I do like Raul with his size. I think his grappling will pay dividends. The striking is going to be a toss-up, but I am taking Raul Rosas Jr. and avoiding this on any parlay where possible. Moving into the co-main event, we have Dustin the Hanyak Jacoby, 36 years old with a 19-8-1 record and the number 15 next to his name, taking on Dominic the Devastator Reyes, 34 years old with a 12-4 record. Now, this fight to me is all about the return of Dominic Reyes for hopefully the last time. He's been out for a year and a half due to blood clots after returning from another year and a half off due to knee injuries. And Dustin, he's coming off the toughest loss to his career. He's looking to rebound and get back on the winning track. So this should be a doozy. Breaking it down, Dustin has a kickboxing style. He's an orthodox fighter. He trains at a Factory X Muay Thai. He's a Cage Fury alum and former champion. He's a 3-time Glory tournament winner. He's a World Series of Fighting, Titan FC, Bellator, and Contender Series alum. He's on a 1-fight losing streak and is 3-3 since 2022. And 12 of his 19 wins are via knockout. Now, Dominic is a southpaw fighter. He has a blue belt in BJJ. He's a King of the Cage and LFA alum. He's on a 4-fight losing streak, and he has not won since October of 2019. 7 of his 12 wins are via knockout, and 3 of his 4 losses are via knockout. So to knock out or be knocked out. Now, me personally, Dustin is a very good and proven kickboxer. He should be more motivated than ever at this point in his career, especially after his last loss. There is a ton of unknowns in this fight, especially for Dominic. But for him to not have given up with all the work that he has put in to come back over and over, I'd assume he is going to be the best version of himself in this fight. He's coming off 3 consecutive knockout losses, though, so that does raise some questions for me to if he could take damage like he used to. But Dustin has struggled against grapplers. That could be Reyes' path to victory here. But I am expecting Dustin to have some success with his kickboxing prowess. I'm not sure how long Dominic's going to be willing to play that game. Plus, with the sketchy chin and all the time off, for the sake of picking, I'm taking Dustin Jacoby, but I'm avoiding this on any parlays where possible. And then in the main event, we have Phoenix's own, the MMA Lab alum, Jared, the Killer Gorilla Cannonier. 40 years old with a 17-6 record and the number 4 next to his name, taking on Nasruddin Amavov, 28 years old with a 13-4 record and the number 7 next to his name. Now, this is a very interesting and intriguing main event. Nasruddin is proving to be an up-and-coming contender, while Jared is a very proven contender who is still fighting at a very high level. He's fought at a high level throughout his late 30s and now even at 40 years old. He has been off for a year, but he is coming off one of the more impressive wins of his career a 5-round beatdown over a annual contender in Marvin Vettori. This fight is giving us 2 striking heavy fighters who should let it all go on a brilliant MMA display for the fans and a title opportunity, potentially knocking on the door for a title opportunity, so strap in. Breaking this down, Jared is an orthodox fighter. He has a brown belt in BJJ. 2 of his last 4 fights have been fight of the night or performance of the night. He's showing up, he's showing out. He has the most significant strikes landed in a UFC middleweight division history. He had 241 in his last fight against Marvin Vettori. He's on a 2-fight winning streak. He is 3-1 since 2022. 10 of his 17 wins are via knockout, and he is rocking a 2.5-inch reach advantage. Now, Nasser Dean is an orthodox fighter. He trains out of the MMA Factory. He's on a 1-fight losing streak and is 2-1-1 since 2022. 5 of his 13 wins are via knockout, 4 via submission, so 9 of his 13 wins are via finish. Now, Nasser Dean may very well have more volume in this fight and may even have a speed advantage, but Jared is going to have the power advantage. He's going to have the grappling advantage, and I think that his team is going to come in here prepared. He's going to have a good game plan to steal a decision and potentially even get the finish. This is Nasser Dean's toughest fight of his UFC career. He did fight Sean Strickland, so debatable. But he lost that fight via unanimous decision at the weight class above at light heavyweight. So this should be a doozy. Although he's 40 years old, I'm taking the killer gorilla. We putting him on that parlay. We marking that ish down, and we getting that bread. So really excited for the Midwest and St. Louis to have the Jared fight, the Dustin fight with the Dominic return, the Mexican showdown, Ricky Tercios and Raul that was supposed to happen, a violent banger, Bruno and Dustin Stoltzfus, and Punahele Soriano and Miguel Baeza on their return tour. Some decent fights in the prelims as well. And that sets us up for next week. We're back to the dang Apex, and it's not a very deep card. The main card has some decent matchmaking. It's definitely a flyweight heavy card, and the main event, we're really going to be able to see how good Tatsuro Taira is, as the young 24-year-old Japanese Tatsuro Taira is taking on Alex Perez. That's episode 51. I'm your host, Shane Gillette. See you next week.